Two, that there is something that is being revealed to, right? There is something that man is made aware of in that time, right? And then lastly, the third thing is the relationship between, and this is what's important, and I'll actually read it. Last bullet point on page 1. In each of the ages, there is a unique revelation of the divine will, right? The line, right? The line is actually, so that this, so that it's the will of God. God uses his will, God's will manifests in time so that devotees have an understanding of their obligations, what they're to do, right? And all of this manifests in terms of a historical period. So I'll read it. In each of the ages, there is a unique revelation of divine will, and humankind is tested to the obedience of to the standard, right? So it is a test, and I'll give examples in a second. It is a test of the devotee during this particular period of time, right? God is going to make revelations. The revelations coincide with the will of God, and the devotee is expected to conform, to obey, obviously, the will of God. The question is, why is the devotee expected to conform, obey the will of God? The answer is obviously simple, because we're talking about fundamentalism. The will of God, as manifest in command, is what is the source for talking about moral action. Moral action is moral because God commanded, right? It's dependent on the command of God as sort of the substrate for all of fundamentalist belief, not just Christian fundamentalists. Okay, so top of page 2. The defining moments within each of the age is the ability to obey the uniquely revealed will of God, right? It's the idea that you are obeying, you are conforming to the will of God, right? And we'll see exactly what the 7 dispensations are, just to make sense of it now, because I can imagine that it's pretty abstract. So this would be the 7 dispensations. Okay, so the first will be innocence. Innocence. And I'm actually going to write all of these down. The second, conscious morality. Right, my conscience, morality. Number 3, human government. Number 4, promise. Number 5, law. Number 6, church. So I'm going to stop there. Church, I need to talk about a little bit. We see that historically speaking, right, and this might cover the totality of, and it's not that it might cover the totality of human existence. It covers all of human existence. Within an age, God reveals via divine will a dispensation. And what we'll see is devotees, to varying degrees, will conform and obey, for example, the law of God, the idea of promise, the idea of church, which becomes seminal, 6. So the idea is, as we get closer to the end, right, this is the beginning of time, if you will, and this is the end of time, if you will. And what we are approaching really is we're approaching the end of time. And it's not just the conceptual end of time. It is the end of time in a very literal sense, right? The literal historical end of history, the end of human existence as we know it. And obviously the end of human existence would require the extermination of human existence, the death of the vast majority of, we'll see other ways in a second. Rapture is another way that human existence is translocated. So the idea is, with respect to the historical progression, we are moving toward a certain definitive end state. Now, we don't know when this end state might be, but there is some fixed end state, and the God of the universe knows when that end state is. And the final revelations will be revealed at that moment, right? The last 2 most important end states are church and millennium, 6 and 7, right? I'm not going to go into the historical discussion on the church. It's just, first of all, it is an extremely hot topic. And my idea is always to just present information. I'm here as a messenger, communicating what's in text, what I've attained from too many hours of reading and studying this material. But the idea of the church, I'll bring that into discussion more when we get to sort of postponement theory, probably in a little bit, right after this. But I'm not going to touch on it too much because it's a very hot topic. And the idea is that I want this to be more than anything an introduction so that you have at least a conversational understanding at a very sort of in-depth level of what's going on with eschatology. Right? 2012 Mayan eschatology. You know, what does that mean? Oh, I understand what 2012 Mayan eschatology might mean. It might be something like this. You have the conceptual means now to discuss the complexities, even if you're not, even if you don't have the level of training that I have. Okay, so we're going to get to a state where we say 7, where we arrive at the millennium, right? And the millennium is identified by 2 stages, right? The rapture and the establishment of the kingdom of God. Obviously, for Christians, this is marked by the return of Christ, right? And the author speaks about this specifically, right? The rapture, R-A-P-T-U-R, I think everybody knows what that might mean, but I'm not going to assume that every R-A-P-T-U-R. The rapture is the belief that the sign, it wouldn't even be a sign. That's pretty direct, right? I guess it would be direct. I guess there could be some debate on whether it's direct or indirect. But the idea is that the final dispensation will be revealed to the world through a rapture, and it's an extraction of believers. Now, my understanding of the rapture is limited. I think from the reading that I've done in other texts that it is both those believers who are alive and those believers who have died will be raptured. I'm not positive on that, so if you're in seminary school, you have a better understanding of the religious belief, or you're clergy yourself, feel free to correct me on this. My YouTube lectures, I don't profess to be, especially in this, I don't profess to be an expert. I have expert level understanding, but there are nuances that I might not quite understand, I might not quite get, but I think I'm right. A lot of this is on the fly, so I can't prepare for everything. But to my recollection, the rapture does coincide with the resurrection of those who have passed, who were of Christian faith, and those surviving Christians who are alive will be extracted, literally, from the planet, right? So, for example, just in a colloquial sort of sense, I've seen stickers like bumper stickers. I'm not making this up. I've seen bumper stickers like this, and maybe you've seen it, where there'll be a bumper sticker on the back of the car, and it says, "In case of rapture, this car will be unmanned." That's the idea, right? In case of the rapture, it's a literal extraction, right? I'm not sure I'm not sure how literal the extraction goes. That part I don't know. If it's literally the body comes out, or the soul is removed from the body, and all that's left is just bodies. But the idea is this car will not be driven by anyone in case of rapture. It's going to careen off the road and so on. Now, again, as I said, I'm not trying to make light of people's religious beliefs, but this is the belief, right? This is the system of belief. So that the final dispensation, the millennial dispensation, is categorized by the rapture and the establishment of the kingdom of God on earth, right? The second coming of Christ, right? So God reveals himself literally and walks with his believers, and we'll talk more about that in a second. So, with respect to dispensational premillennialism, dispensation refers to distinct eras, ages, technically, distinct ages within time, and there aren't dates for these ages. It's a give or take. It's more fluid than anything, right? These ages are defined by concepts that I've spoken about: innocence, law, the church, so on. The final dispensation is millennium, all right, the millennial dispensation. That is going to be marked by 2 events: the rapture first, historically speaking, if you want to situate it in time. Then after the rapture, God's sort of walking with, establishment of the kingdom of God here on earth. Okay, so the next part to recognize, in the middle of page 2, is what's known as eschatological postponement theory.